My mom let her boyfriend SME and my sister for 3 years until I planned revenge, which caused her to unalive and sent him to a death sentence. Also, if the flare is wrong, sorry. Also, TLDR at the end. Edit. The reason I put the sentences that are right below this is because I know myself. It sounds completely insane, and a few people will say it's fake. Trust me, there is no one on this earth who wishes it was fake more than me. If I could go back, I would go to the neighbors sooner. But my reality is that I caused the unalive of my mom. I had to mature very early. I became like a surrogate to my sister for those last 3 years. I only wanted him to beat her up. He went to jail, and my mom got help. I never wanted her to unalive. First, this is a throwaway account. I will not be replying to comments. Take this as you will. This is my story of revenge against my mother and Osser. First, our father passed away 4 years before all this started. Car crash. Maybe our lives would have been better if he hadn't unalived that day. Also, before I get into this, one thing you should know is that before this man came into our lives, our mother was amazing. She was loving, supportive, and put us above everything. But she would soon replace us with her new man and her new meth habit. When I was around 9 and my little sister was 7, our mom started dating this man, let's call him Poss. Poss was tall and weighed about 250 pounds. He had oily, brown hair and a face filled with sores. I didn't like him from the start. He made me uncomfortable, to say the least. A few months after they started dating, Poss moved into our house. Everything was okay for the first few weeks, I guess. Then my mom started to act funny. Staying up all night, not cooking us lunch or supper, not cleaning, snapping at us for no reason, and starting to hit us. Our lives had been turned upside down by this man so quickly. Then one night, he came into my bedroom, held me down, and SM'd me. I was screaming and crying for my mom, begging her to come help me, to come save me, please. And then I saw her. Stood at the door, watching him SM'd me. My mom was just letting him do this to me. She was just watching, like she was looking at a TV or something. When he finished and climbed off of me, he walked up to my mom, kissed her, and walked away with her. My mom just left me, crying and bleeding. I was just SA, and she allowed it to happen. Not long after they walked out, I heard them having sex in the living room. It was my 10th birthday. Happy birthday to me. A couple of nights later, I heard my little sister crying. I get out of bed to find my mom standing in her doorway. I run to the room to try to help her, and my mom sees me. She backhands me across the face, making me slam against the hallway wall. I can hear my sister crying and begging. With no one coming to help her, that day was the day I started hating my mother. The SA and Oz went on for 3 years. I didn't know at the beginning, but soon found out that Poss had gotten my mom using meth. Poss and meth were the only important things in her life. My sister and I were nothing more than his play toys. I soon started noticing them arguing more and more about who got more hits. This one was stashing from the other one, and you smoked the last of it all by yourself. This is when I started planning my revenge. I noticed that after about 3 days, they would finally pass out and would sleep for almost 2 hours. And their bag of meth would always be on the bedside table beside the Poss. I know most would ask, why didn't you call the police or child welfare? Because jail wasn't enough. He might have S'd us, but she betrayed us. She turned her back on us. And I wanted revenge and wanted her to suffer like we had. So every chance I got, I would move the bag, just at first. Make it look tampered with. Then I started taking it from the bag and placing some on my mom's table. These things alone caused a lot of fighting. They started getting physical. I would keep my sister and I out of sight when this went on, and they never lasted long. Well, I continued to do this over a couple of months, taking more and more, flushing it, or dropping it down the sink. Until the last day. The last day, I took the whole bag. It's a good amount. They had just re-upped, like they would say. I flushed the whole bag, and I locked my sister and me in my room and quietly prayed that they didn't realize it was me. I am not sure how long after I did this, everything started. But we had watched like 3 Disney movies before they finally woke up. And then I heard him start yelling about his missing bag. The yelling got louder and more intense, and then I heard the breaking of objects. It was starting to get bad now. I hear my mom go from angry to scared. I hear him hitting her, and she begs him to stop. She swore she didn't touch it. He continues to hit, and she continues to beg. begging him to stop hurting her and begging someone to come help her. Begging like we begged her for so many nights. My sister started asking to leave. She was scared and crying. I opened my window, put my sister outside, and followed. We ran to the neighbors and told them that Paz was beating our mom. The neighbor called the police and brought us inside. And we watched as the police pulled up to our house. I started to walk up to the door, stopped for a second, and then started yelling at the police and kicked the door open. After what felt like forever, we see Paz being brought out of the police car. I wait to see my mom follow, but she doesn't. I see an ambulance pull up, and the paramedics run into the gurney. A short time later, I see them rushing back with my mom. I catch a glimpse of her once beautiful face, now looking like ground meat. Her face was solid red, covered in blood. She ended up unalive on the way to the hospital. I never planned to have my mother unalive. I just wanted her to feel the pain we had been feeling for the last few years. And I guess in the end she did. She felt the pain and terror we felt every night for the last 3 years. She just felt it all in one night. Do I feel bad about what I did? No, I don't. If I hadn't done what I did, we would have been stuck there, being SA and beaten every day until one of us would have unalive. Paz was convicted of second-degree murder, possession of drug paraphernalia. I flushed the actual drugs, child adultery pictures of us, 23 counts of aggravated SA, and 17 counts of aggravated SA against a person under 12 years of age. That last one is a death sentence where this all happened. We moved a few states over to be with our dad's parents. We hadn't seen them in almost 4 years, and for the first time in a long time, we actually felt safe. My sister, still to this day, doesn't know what I did. Doesn't know that I played a big part in our mom's passing. And since we never talk about either of them, it never comes up. We are both happily married now. I have 3 children. She has 2. Both of us are active members of our PTA. No one looking at us today would ever guess the hell we went through, or what I did to get us out of it. TLDR. Our mom allowed her boyfriend to SAS for 3 years. They were hooked on meth. I made it look like mom was stealing it to make them fight. He ended up beating her to unalive. I didn't want her unalive. That wasn't my intention. He is in jail, and my little sister and I are finally happy. Second story. My fiancé's son falsely accused me of SAing him for the past 6 months, which ruined my life. I have been in a relationship with my fiancé for nearly 3 years now. We intend to get married early next year and are both very happy. She has a 15-year-old son from a previous marriage, with whom I developed a close relationship. I always thought of him as a little brother. He always gave me a hand to take things to the dump and clean up the yard. We went fishing and camping some weekends, and he always told me what was going on in his life. I guess, thinking about it now, he has always been a strange kid. I caught him staring at me a couple of times when I was working out, which was strange. He would walk in on me in the shower and stare. I never really thought much of it. His mother works weekends. I usually sleep in as I work fairly long hours during the week. I woke up to the kid, with no clothes in my bed, sucking my D. I was kind of stunned initially, and didn't know what to say, then angry and yelled at him to get out, and what the hell are you doing? He screams at me, saying he loves me, and doesn't want me to marry his mother and be with him. I tell him he is just confused, and we will get him to see a psychologist. The whole thing seems surreal, and I don't really know what to tell the kid who is crying without clothes and going off his tree, screaming at me hysterically. I get out of bed and start to put my clothes on. He tells me he is going to unalive himself if I tell anyone. He then tells me if I don't love him, he will tell everyone. I asked him, then unalive himself. I told him this is weird and to settle down and it will all pass. If he is into dudes, that's fine, but I love his mom and I can't be with him. He stormed out of the room, yelling and swearing at me and crying. He hates me. I get a phone call about an hour later, and she is screaming at me hysterically that I asked her son, and I better be out of the house when she gets back, and the police are going to come get me. I tried to explain what actually happened, but she wouldn't hear it. So here I am, booked into a hotel room, waiting for the cops to come arrest me. Will they believe me when my own fiancé doesn't? Update. I feel sick and stressed, and I hope getting this out will make me feel better, as I don't really have anyone to talk to or family to talk to. I felt I had to leave after the first phone call from my fiancée, not because I was guilty, but because it was her house. I have supported her and her son for the last 3 years, as she has not been able to work. She owns the house and had done so prior to our relationship. I received a second phone call not long after, with her screaming at me as to how I could ESA her son, and she didn't believe me when I told her I didn't, and what had actually happened. She said if she had to choose who to believe between me and her son, she would always believe her son, and she went off on a rant that she should never have trusted me around him, and a whole heap of other stuff. I couldn't get a word in, and she hung up. About an hour later, her brother had tracked me down. We live in a small town with 2 hotels. Pretty much kicked the door in and was going to kick SHT through me in his own words. He tried to punch me, and I moved with him, punching a brick wall hard, then screaming in agony. I heard a snap, so I guess he broke his hand. I left with him crying in agony. I didn't bother calling an ambulance or even staying. I never liked him and don't really care what happens to him. I decided to leave town as I expect the rest of her family to have a go at me now. I have tried to contact a lawyer, but have not had a call back yet at that time. I can't speak to the police as she has family on the force. I am receiving phone calls and unalive threats from members of her family, with her sister being the only one who hears me out and seems to believe me. A couple of hours later, she calls me and tells me Scott has made a statement to the police that I ESA him, and that I have been doing it almost daily over the past 6 months. She tells me the police found issues with his story, and when it was mentioned that he would have to do a ESA kit, he broke down, crying how he had made it all up. Apparently, there had been previous issues his mom didn't know about with him at some park that was known as a gay beat, the police said, but he wouldn't admit to it. I really don't think I can marry this woman now. I feel hurt and betrayed. I know it is her son, but I thought she knew me well enough to know I would never ESA someone, let alone her kid. I never thought he would do this to me either. I knew he had a lot of growing up to do, but I never expected this. I think it's time for me to make a new life and go somewhere else.